All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going deep into this hidden world of protozoan parasites. We're going to get to know two of them, entamoeba and leishmania, and figure out what makes them tick. And you'll see they have some really surprising connections to our overall health.
So, think about this for a second. What if there's a whole city, a massive world, living inside of you that you can't even see? Because, that's not really that far from the truth. Our bodies are home to this huge, unseen universe of microorganisms, and today, we're putting two of its most fascinating residents right under the microscope. So what even are protozoa? Well, at first glance, they might seem pretty simple. They're just single-celled organisms, kind of like bacteria. But, and this is a huge but, there's one absolutely critical difference that puts them in a whole different category. They're eukaryotes.
And here's a really great way to think about that difference. Imagine a bacterium is like a simple studio apartment. Everything's just kind of out in one open space. A protozoan, though, that's like a multi-room house. It has a special room, the nucleus, just for its DNA, and all these other little compartments doing specialized jobs. That complexity means it's on a completely different branch of the evolutionary tree.
Okay, so that brings us to our first case file, the genus Entamoeba. And we're about to meet two very different members of this family. One is a pretty serious troublemaker, and the other, well, it's basically just along for the ride.
So what do these things actually look like? Well, entamoeba are these relatively big, shape-shifting amoebas. They don't have tails or anything like that. Instead, they move by pushing out parts of their body. We call them pseudopods, which literally means false feet, to kind of crawl around and swallow their food. It's amazingly dynamic for something so tiny.
Let's start with the pathogenic one, Entamoeba histolytica. The whole problem begins when a person accidentally swallows these incredibly tough, dormant cysts, usually from contaminated food or water. Once those cysts get to the large intestine, they basically wake up and morph into their active feeding form, which is called a trophozoid. And these are the little guys that go on the attack.
So how do they do so much damage? Well, these trophozoids release enzymes that literally dissolve the intestinal wall, allowing them to burrow right into the tissue. This invasion is what causes all those classic, awful signs of amoebic dysentery, especially something called tenesmus, which is that terrible, painful feeling of having to go to the bathroom, but nothing happens.
So, finding this invader means you have to go on a bit of a hunt. A lab technician will look at a stool sample under the microscope, searching for either those tough little cysts or the active moving trophozoids. They can also use blood tests, called serology, to look for antibodies, which is a sure sign that your body is putting up a fight against an actual invasion.
And once it's confirmed, the treatment is actually pretty direct. The go-to drug is metronidazole. It's a really powerful antiprotozoal that's great at killing off those active, invading trophozoites and just stopping the disease right in its tracks.
Okay, but now for the plot twist. There's this other entamoeba called Entamoeba gingivalis, and it lives in our mouths. And unlike its destructive cousin in the gut, this one is often described with this phrase right here. It's a mere passenger.
I mean, the difference between these two is just night and day. On one side, you have E. histolytica, a true pathogen, lives in the gut, invades tissue, and you absolutely need medicine to get rid of it. But on the other side, you have E. gingivalis. It hangs out in your mouth, totally harmless, just munching on bacteria and debris. It doesn't cause disease. But, and this is key, seeing it is a huge red flag for poor oral hygiene.
Okay, let's switch gears and head to our second case file, because leishmania is a totally different beast. This is a protozoan that doesn't fight in the gut. No, this one wages war from inside our own immune system. So forget about contaminated water. You get leishmania from the bite of an infected female sandfly. Right away, this method of transmission, being carried by an insect, puts it in a completely different league of threat.
The strategy leishmania uses is just brilliant in a terrifying way. It doesn't just fight our immune system, it hijacks it. The parasite gets itself eaten on purpose by our macrophages, the big defensive cells of our body, and then it turns them into a perfect hiding spot. Our body freaks out, releases a flood of inflammatory signals, and you end up with this destructive tug-of-war happening inside the very cells that are supposed to be protecting you.
So how do you possibly find a hijacker like that? Well, you have to look where it operates. Diagnosis means looking at stained blood films or even tissue samples, literally searching for the parasites hiding inside those macrophage cells. It's a totally different kind of investigation than looking for entamoeba.
Okay, so we've looked at an invader that attacks the gut, and a hijacker that takes over the immune system.
It's time to pull these two case files together and find out what on earth this has to do with, of all things, dentistry.
And this really is the million-dollar question, right? We have a gut parasite, a harmless little mouth passenger, and this systemic hijacker. How in the world do these connect to what happens when you're sitting in the dental chair?
And here is where it all clicks into place. Look, none of these protozoa are causing a direct dental problem that your dentist needs to fix. Instead, they're about something bigger. For parasites like E. histolytica or Leishmania, the real implication is about holistic care. It's about the dentist knowing your whole health story and understanding your immune system might be compromised. For the one in your mouth, E. gingivalis, it's just a signal to double down on brushing and flossing. And the thread that ties all of this together, the single most important takeaway is this: universal infection control. Always.
So, what's the big takeaway here? All of this really points to a much bigger idea. Seeing your health not as a bunch of separate pieces, but as one deeply connected system. At the end of the day, it all boils down to one simple, powerful principle. You have to treat the whole patient, not just the mouth. The presence of these parasites, whether they're in your gut or your blood, is just a powerful reminder that your oral health and your systemic health are completely linked. The mouth really is a window to the rest of the body.
Which kind of leaves us with this final thought. What does it really mean to understand this constant, invisible dance between microbes and our immune system? A dance that's happening inside of you right this very second. Realizing that's going on isn't just cool science. It fundamentally changes how we think about our own health.